Artificial intelligence and machine learning is a technology that's now being incorporated into medical devices. And we call this software as a medical device, or SaMD. SaMD products are products that are intended for use to treat, diagnose, cure, mitigate, prevent diseases. Those are the examples of SaMD types of products. It's not the software that goes into hardware medical devices. That software is regulated with the hardware medical device. CDRH is the agency within the FDA that regulates these products, as with all medical device products. But since this is a relatively new area, CDRH partnered with global regulatory agencies from around the world to create the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, or IMDRF. And IMDRF created 4 categories of risk levels for SaMD products, where 4 is the most risky and 1 is the least risky. And with these different categorizations, they looked at different applications for SaMD products and evaluated the criticality of the device, so either critical, serious, or non-serious. And also looked at the different applications for these devices to create a grid that has the different risk levels and how those risk levels are evaluated. And along those lines, they also created a quality management system with a common understanding of vocabulary for the various applications of quality systems that would be used with these types of products. The quality system describes how the risk categorization affects the quality control of that particular product, and also how the product is going to be evaluated from a clinical perspective as well as from a technical perspective. It demonstrates the safety, efficacy, and the performance with regard to the valid clinical association, along with the analytical validation and the clinical validation. And you can find more information about these details on the FDA website that's in CDRH. CDRH also provides a database of other SaMD products and their details about those products, and you can find that on the FDA website. It's also important to understand the difference between locked and learning algorithms as you evaluate your product against other products and the risk level that those products represent. Like all medical devices, SaMD products are approved based on classification. So Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. And these different classifications represent different risk levels and also represent different approval processes. So the classification of medical devices depends upon the intended use and the indications for use. It depends upon the risk level of the device, the risk to the patient, where 1 is the least risky and Class 3 is the most risky medical device applications. And so the classification also requires different levels of approval. Class 1 devices require only registration on the FDA, with the FDA. Class 2 devices are approved via either a 510(k) clearance or via a de novo application. And Class 3 devices are the most risky, and they need to demonstrate safety and efficacy of the device, and so require a PMA approval. An example of a Class 1 device might be a device that analyzes retrospective clinical data. There's very little risk to the patient in analyzing retrospective data. However, a Class 2 device, And as an example, the Dexcom G6 CMG system is a great example of a Class 2 device. Is a little bit more risky than a Class 1 device, and it requires demonstration of either equivalence to an existing approved medical device, Class 2 device, or go through a de novo application, but it represents a moderate level of risk. Whereas a Class 3 device, the Guardian Connection CGM is an example of a Class 3 device that interacts with an implantable sensor to monitor glucose levels. So the risk level is a little bit higher, the risk is a little greater, and therefore FDA requires that these Class 3 devices have more extensive safety and efficacy as incorporated into the application. You should be aware that not all software is considered a medical device. Some examples in the healthcare system that are not considered as medical devices are administrative support to a healthcare facility, software that supports that, or software for maintaining and encouraging healthy lifestyle, or software for transferring, storing, converting formats is also not regulated by the FDA. And also data software that provides for certain limited clinical decision support is also not regulated by the FDA. How does the FDA regulate approval? Well, with the 510(k) clearance process, which is demonstrating safety and efficacy to a predicate device, the applicant merely needs to submit the 510(k) clearance for approval. And the FDA has 90 days to get back to the sponsor get back with any questions, and questions may stop the clock of the 90 days. But in any case, the FDA only has 90 days to review the application and either reject it or let it go through as approval. How do you know whether your SaMD is a Class 2 device? Well, FDA has a database of all of the Class 2 devices that have been approved, and you can search that database and find products that are comparable to the SaMD that you're developing and demonstrate that this is a Class 2 device. Class 2 or medium risk devices that could be Class 2, but where there's no predicate, need to go through a de novo process. And that means that you need to demonstrate the safety and efficacy of the device, but it's considered to be moderate risk, so that there's less safety and efficacy that may be required in order to get a de novo application for a product. Devices that are Class 3 devices, and so these are the riskiest of devices, SaMD devices that are being developed, require a PMA approval. And that means that you have to evaluate the safety and the efficacy of these Class 3 medical devices with more extensive studies in order to demonstrate this. It may require that you do non-clinical studies. And some of this may be the IMDRF analytical validation studies that were listed as part of the IMDRF, and it also will involve clinical studies that need to be done. Again, these protocols can be described through the IMDRF process. How do you know where your product fits into all of these schemes? And how do you know what clinical studies you need to do? Well, you need to create a regulatory strategy, a manufacturing strategy, a clinical strategy, and a development plan. And to do this, it's best if you go out and find people who are experienced in doing this. So find consultants, find mentors, find EIRs from the incubators that you're in, or create an advisory board of people that can help you to create these different strategies. How do you find these experts? Well, do an internet search and find SaMD, either regulatory consultants or other people who have been involved in the development of SaMD products. Do a LinkedIn search and look for medical device consultants who have experience with SaMD products. Or you can talk to your network of folks who have consultants that they've used previously to help them through this process. It's always a good idea to go talk to the FDA, and the FDA encourages companies to speak with them early and often. They want to make sure that you have all of the right information going into a development process and going through an approval process. And you can expedite that whole process by actually talking to the FDA, whether it's a pre-submission document, whether it's submission issue requests, whether it's study risk determinations, or whether it's just an informational meeting for the strategies that you've put together. Go talk to the FDA and let them help you to understand whether they're in agreement with what your proposals are. And it's important that you submit proposals to the FDA of your strategies. Don't just go ask questions, because the FDA will send that back and say, come back with proposals. We're not here just to simply answer questions. So create proposals to submit to the FDA. What can you learn through a Q submission meeting? You can learn about the device classification. You can learn about the IMDRF categories and what the FDA thinks the categories are for your particular product. You can discuss the product development pathways and whether you've incorporated all of the necessary testing that the FDA is going to require in order to evaluate your approval process, your approval application. And you can also talk to them about the clinical studies that you're planning and make sure that you've incorporated and they have agreement on the clinical trials that you're going to be doing. Be aware that these meetings with the FDA are non-binding. That means that what the FDA tells you is not something that they're going to go back and look at when they evaluate your approval process. And it's non-binding on the sponsor, because your development path may alter some of the information that you've provided in these early communications with the FDA. So the FDA regards these as non-binding, and they go into the file, but they're not part of the final approval process.